Greg Sankey was on Joel Klatt's show yesterday. It was the same type of interview that Klatt did with Nick Saban a week ago. Quite honestly, Greg Sankey reminded me a lot of Nick Saban. Very methodical, very political with his answers, boring a lot of times, but gave some intriguing answers on issues in college football. Because as we all know right now, college football is going through a massive, massive transition. And he talked about playoff expansion, the calendar, the scheduling, conference games, NIL, transfer portal. I encourage all of you to go and check out that interview with the forewarning that you're not going to get any real answers, honestly, because Greg Sankey says a lot while saying nothing. A couple of things, though, that Greg Sankey brought in that kind of stood out to me. A couple of annoying things. One was he talked about how the SEC didn't need playoff expansion. And his quote was, "The number of teams that have captured national championships out of this league is remarkable, and that's unique. That's part of what sets us apart. So we didn't have to expand." And I meant that. Even after we announced the additions of Oklahoma and Texas, I'm still comfortable staying at 4. I don't think we are going to have fewer teams in the 4 than we've had. But the feeling was that we weren't building upon the existing health of college football to the future of college football, particularly because we have an entire segment of the country not involved in the national championship, and that's the West Coast. This is a flat-out lie by Greg Sankey. Okay, I'm just going to tell you this is a flat-out lie. He's trying to pretend that the expansion didn't help the SEC, and it was more about involving other conferences. If it was about involving other conferences and other regions, one, the SEC itself wouldn't be expanding that 16 teams, and now rumors are they're trying to raid the ACC, which they are. And more importantly than that, he would have been fine with the initial proposal, which was an 8-team playoff where the 5 Power 5 champions go, the top group of 5 champion goes, and then 2 wild cards. He didn't want that either. And the reason he didn't want that, the reason he went to 12, was he wanted to maximize the number of SEC teams that could possibly get in, which is fine. That's the goal. It's about maximizing the revenue and the money. But quite honestly, just be upfront with that. He wanted more. That was one of the holdups on expanding the playoff to begin with, was Sankey wanted a 12-team playoff. I think there were a couple of other conferences and commissioners who did. I believe Notre Dame wanted a 12-team playoff because that opened more wild card spots because they can't get an automatic bid as a conference champion. But for him to say something like that, that's just quite honestly it's just annoying that he would say something like that because it's just not true based on what he was trying to do. He wanted to expand and he just wanted to make sure they expanded to 12, not 8. Now, another interesting thing Sankey said was about future SEC schedules. Now, this is a big one. As we know, Sankey wanted 9 games for an SEC schedule starting next year with 16 teams and no divisions. The schools couldn't agree. Tennessee was one of the ones that blocked them along with Alabama, and the SEC is now stuck at 8 games next year. You can't have competitive balance in this league if you have an 8-game schedule with 16 teams and no divisions. It just can't happen. Sankey said, quote, "Our decisions about scheduling will have a lot of factors: non-conference game access, the number of conference games, how we place and how we schedule. Within the conference context, while we try to spread conference games throughout the season, we're somewhat unique in that we start week 2 with really important games. If you're going to play in week 2, that means you're going to have to fill some games out later in the season with non-conference foes." That is the most non-answer answer I've ever heard in my life. Okay, he was asked about how the SEC was going to design their future schedules. What he said doesn't mean anything. The real question was, how did he not have his troops in order in line for the SEC scheduling when the meeting in Destin happened 2 weeks ago? And I have to be honest with you guys. I think Greg Sankey is losing his grip on the conference. I think that what he doesn't want to acknowledge is he tries to act like everything's under control, but it's not. They added Texas and Oklahoma, just really quick. Texas and Oklahoma asked to join the league, it looks like, and Sankey added them after having already signed that big deal with ESPN and ABC that they're locked into for 10 years, while the Big Ten has a TV deal worth twice as much that they'll get out of in 7 years. So before the SEC gets its next conference, before the SEC gets its next TV deal, the Big Ten will be on into its second deal, while its first one is already more than twice as much as the SEC is now. He got played. Greg Sankey doesn't want to admit this, but he got played. He got played by the Big Ten. He got played by the networks. He got played by ESPN. And he played himself by not being prepared for how the league was going to go about scheduling when it added Texas and Oklahoma. And a lot of these questions need to be asked of Greg Sankey, honestly. And he's saying a lot without saying much and without saying anything. And I think there's a lot of wanting to try to get interviews with him, understanding that he is right now the pantheon of college football because his decision-making, a decision he makes carries more weight than a decision anybody else in college football makes right now. But that's all the more reason to ask him how he could get played by Kevin Warren and the Big Ten, how he could get played with not being prepared with Texas and Oklahoma joining the league. I mean, guys, I don't know what's going to happen beyond 2024, but if they don't hash this out quickly, there will be some annual Tennessee will not be playing Alabama in 2025. That rivalry's gone. Okay, because you can't stick with an 8-team schedule in the SEC. You have to go to 9. So I think Greg Sankey is getting away with a lot right now. And he said a lot while saying nothing in this interview yesterday. And I think he needs to be called out for it. I mean, he didn't even answer if all conferences should go to the same scheduling. He was asked about that. He was talking about the challenges presented by NIL. I mean, and all he said with NIL was that, kids spend a lot of money when they have it when they're 18 or 19. Okay, so how do you address it? I mean, again, he's not saying really anything. And I think the thing that's concerning, if you're an SEC football fan, is I don't think he's getting out ahead of this stuff either, guys. I really don't. I think Greg Sankey is Greg Sankey took over the best product in America, which is SEC football. The best product in America. It's the most valuable product, in opinion, in America. Wasn't that hard to mess up? And I don't think he messed it up. But I think the revenue and the popularity it's getting is not a testament to him. I think it's a testament to the SEC is just naturally a great product as it is. Similar to Roger Goodell in the NFL. A lot of people think Roger Goodell is a good commissioner because of the money the NFL's been bringing in over the last 10 years. I take the opposite approach. I think the NFL is just a naturally great product, and you have to work at it to mess it up. You actually have to actively do things to screw it up, and Roger Goodell hasn't actively done things to screw it up. He has made a lot of missteps that hurt some of the NFL's following at different years. I got to be honest with you. So no, I don't think Roger Goodell is a good commissioner just because the NFL increases in revenue. It increases in revenue every year because he took over a good situation. This is like when a CEO takes over a great company that's on the rise. I think I'm just going to say it. I think the SEC, I think Greg Sankey might be the Roger Goodell of the SEC. He's taken over a product that is an amazing product that I could sell. Honestly, that anybody could sell it. I'm a terrible salesperson. I'll be honest with you, but I could sell that to anybody. The SEC is a heck of a product. It's very much Larry Coker the first year at Miami when he inherited that Miami Hurricanes team and won a national title that Butch Davis had built that was the most talented team in college football history. I mean, we see that all the time in college football and college basketball where a coach takes over a program that another coach built up, and then that coach enjoys the fruits of the labor and just rides the wave of success. Some people might say Philip Fulmer did that when he was at Tennessee. And I'm going to argue that Greg Sankey is doing the same thing in the SEC right now. And yes, Roger Goodell is doing the exact same thing in the NFL. They're both riding a wave. They inherited a good product. You and I could have made that product successful. What the Big Ten did was a little bit different. The Big Ten product is not as good as the SEC's. It's not. South Carolina versus Kentucky is going to be a bigger draw every time than Illinois versus Purdue. It just is. The Big Ten is not as good of a product, yet they got a better deal on their TV deals, and they have a better scheduling method, and everybody was on board for the scheduling method, by the way, for football. So they get to protect all their rivals. So the Big Ten was put together very, very, very. The Big Ten has been completely organized, completely methodical. They got USC and UCLA after the SEC got Texas and Oklahoma, and they were more prepared for their scheduling. And Greg Sankey needs to be called out on these things. And he shouldn't do another interview until someone asks him about why he didn't have his ducks in a row for the scheduling and how he let the Big Ten get a deal worth twice as much as the SEC. And if the SEC will be able to renegotiate with ESPN whatsoever, because this contract was done before Texas and Oklahoma were added. And if they can't, then the SEC signed a bad deal and they got played by ESPN. And they need to be called out for that because this is a 10-year deal, guys. That means if they're stuck in this, that means for 10 years, the Big Ten will be bringing in twice as much revenue as the SEC. That's a dangerous proposition, because then that will make the Big Ten product competitive with the SEC, because they will have the revenue to hire good coaches, to invest in facilities, and do and for NIL from boosters, honestly, because the boosters don't have to donate as much to the program. These are big issues. These are things that have to be addressed by the SEC, because you can't let other conferences in this horse race pass you by, and he's letting the Big Ten pass him by.